and it's been accounted for within the site plan. And the sidewalk would exist within the regional right-of-way and has also been accounted for within this plan.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I know we're still in the very early phases, but are we looking at a phased development, or are both buildings going to get built at the same time?
I'd have to defer to the actual builder. It would be phased, yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Kim.
Sorry, one other quick note. I know I'm usually the only one that kind of brings this up, but I've never been a proponent of modern contemporary looks, and I don't really like the aesthetics of this one, with all due respect to the architect. I find that all the newer construction that's been going on, it's really not complementary to the Aurora look, and if you would consider something a little bit more classic and timeless, that'd be great. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for the proponent? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you coming out.
Thank you for not making me answer for the architect.
Linda, if you could put the motion up on the screen, please. If I could have someone put that on the floor so we can discuss it, please. Councillor Thompson, thank you. Second. Councillor Humphreys. Speakers to the motion, please. Councillor Abel, Thompson, Humphreys.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we often recommend that it come back to a planning meeting when there's a lot of concerns to be resolved before we bring it to general committee. That's usually when there's a packed house. It's almost always the case. So this is a very interesting, that I have a lot of concerns about the parking and the entry and the exiting. So the U-turns is going to be predominant, and I think the region will probably see that as well. So they've got to address that. And I had a dog, our first dog, and it was in a backyard that we had fenced, and we had a visitor. I think the dog was about 8 years old, and this dog was a lot smaller, and it immediately came in, and under the fence it went, and my dog saw it do that, and it forever after that, once it saw that. So when people see U-turns is the way to go, or they do it once, they'll always do it. I go by that corner every morning, and I do a U-turn to go into Tim Hortons every single morning, and I'm doing it at 6 in the morning, so the traffic is relatively tame.
We now have you on tape, and I'm going to send that to YRP.
They observe it every morning because they're all going to work. It's not illegal. No one's got hurt yet so far. Anyways, it really will. This will promote U-turns. People will just do it. Going north on Leslie Street, you'll immediately do what I do, and that's go across south of Wellington, because I turn right and then make it look like in a way you go. Anyways, that's something that's got to be done. This site, I think it's really good in a way that there's density there, and you have all the components that's on a busy street, and in 30 years from now, it'll probably fit in just right. So it's kind of advanced thinking, and it meets our intensification growth demand by the province. So, I mean, all that makes sense to me. This site, though, is for the next foreseeable future, 5-10 years, is car dependent. There is no transit. Anyone that is there. The other thing is we've seen that you'll have more than 1 or 2 cars per unit. They may come to the sales office and look over and say, okay, just get 1 parking lot. And when our kids grow up, we see that right now everywhere in Aurora. We're more of a 2-car family minimum. So that is a huge challenge. And I don't know how, I think that has to really be thought out before we can sort of get that answer. To say okay now, without knowing that, I'm not comfortable doing that. I am comfortable with the development idea of intensification, as I've said. So that, and I really appreciate that they have an array of of affordable, like a scale, moving forward, like a single bedroom. So there is that possibility. So those are sort of my thoughts, Mr. Mayor. I would like to see it come back before this planning committee, if that seems appropriate.
Councillors Thompson and Humphreys. Gardner.
I just wanted to echo some of the concerns that both, members of council as well as staff have brought up, specifically the access. It just, until that ramp at St. John's gets built, the flow of traffic just does not make sense. They're either going to cut through the Smart Center property and come down, as we heard, on the State Farm Road, or they're going to do those U-turns. And so it is an issue, and it will create a future problem. So something needs to be figured out with regards to that. And same is the concern of just ensuring that there's enough parking so that they don't utilize the SARC. Because, as we continue to add to the SARC and we have a number of different initiatives, we're going to have constraints of our own to satisfy residents for that parking lot. So those are my two comments. The density and the configuration as well as the height, I echo some of those concerns as well.
Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully not being repetitive, and I appreciate Mr. Liversich's feedback tonight, and I'm very familiar with the house because I too use U-turns to get to that Tim Hortons. That really needs to be looked at. I mean, before this development gets anywhere near development, that really has to be looked at. It's a pretty serious concern right now. Can't even imagine it with the new development should it go forward. Just the other concern I have is, I find I know we're supposed to do all this densification. I just find there's so much in that area right now. It's just another huge layer. I really am looking forward to seeing the traffic overview feedback. It's just incredible as it is now with the growth. To add these two high density, in my view, apartments, as nice as they can be, although I'm with Councillor Kim, I do like more of a traditional look. But it seems to be very modern and everyone seems to like them these days. Would love to see, a less height and a less large space being utilized. I know they're being asked for more densification, but for me, just seems so much in that area. And I am concerned with the parking spaces as well, and just visitor parking and all that nature. So I know that staff's heard all that, and so is the developer. So I think those are my major concerns. Oh, and also just a comment, vegetation, tree management plan, very, very top and foremost. And please, if we can make an amendment, if we haven't already, to Councillor Abel's, this needs to come back to a planning meeting. I don't want to see this at GC. Okay, thanks.
Councillors Gardner, Perry, Kim.
Thank you. I share all of the concerns expressed. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Muno. Mr. Muno, do you know how many trees are going to be removed from this property?
Mr. Mayor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I don't offhand, but they have submitted a tree inventory report, so it's information that we can obtain.
Thank you. But likely with this massing, there'll be a lot of trees going. There's a comment, was a comment about the amenity area, that the town is speaking with the developer about that. Could you elaborate on that?
Mr. Miller?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think our Parks and Rec staff just wants some more information from the developer with respect to the amount of amenity space being provided on site. And I think we saw some of those renderings with respect to, the landscaped area, a child's playground. So when it comes to amenity area, as council is aware, our current zoning standard is, dates back a number of years or a number of decades. And with multi-story buildings, we typically see a reduction in that amenity space, but it's made up amongst a number of different factors. Ground floor amenity space, whether it's the tot lot, the proposed garden, any rooftop space, and balconies as well. And in some instances, I believe in indoor space, but that's something that we will put together and report back on as well.
Thank you. It'd be nice to have some indoor amenity space for the winter months. With respect to the height, what is the height restriction for this area?
Mr. Mino?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, currently the lands are designated under official plan as community commercial. And so the community commercial doesn't really have a maximum height, but typically in this area, the local commercial allows maximum of 3-story heights. So they're seeking an official plan amendment to go to 6, redesignate the lands to the similar medium high density designation that currently exists in the 2B planning area, albeit it's along Wellington Street on the former Stronach property, both north and south of Wellington. Those are the 2 parcels that have the medium and high density designation, which permits 4 or up to 7 stories in certain instances.
So thank you. I'm not clear. So would this be a 4-story restriction?
Mr. Mino?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, currently the commercial designation wouldn't permit 6 stories. I mean, again, they're seeking a redesignation from commercial to residential and a height permission of 6 stories.
Thank you. Follow-up. So would there be an opportunity for bonusing for the town?
Mr. Mino?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it's within our ability because our official plan does include bonusing provisions under Section 37 of the Plan Act.
Thank you. With respect to the comment about the well water, I looked at the studies that have been provided. I don't think they would address the well water, so how is that addressed?
Mr. Mino?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, typically it's a requirement that we would, if there is an adjacent private well, we would ask the developer to do the proper investigation and monitoring moving forward. So they would have to take that under consideration.
Thank you. I also have a concern about the front yard setback. We spoke earlier today, taking it from 9 meters to 6 meters, especially if it was a 6-story building. I don't know if anybody at this table has heard from residents about the townhouse development on the north side of Wellington between Bayview and Leslie. Those homes are very close to the street, and I've been asked how we allowed that. So I have the same concern here. If we have a very large building and it's very close to the street, I think it could be an issue. Mr. Uno, I don't really understand from the drawing, if the, on the regional right-of-way, if they do a sidewalk on this side, on their portion, then would the 6 meters start at the sidewalk?
Mr. Mino?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, so the applicant is proposing a 6-meter, which is approximately 20-foot setback from the proposed building to their property line. So east of their property line, that's where the regional right-of-way begin. And currently, it looks like there's close to a 9-meter right-of-way, which is the part of the boulevard that the region owns. They've already, my understanding, taken a widening. They'll likely build another turn lane there. So what would be left in the within the regional right-of-way would be approximately another 20-foot, which would be, landscaped, sodded, which would also include the sidewalk.
So thank you. Follow-up. So even after the road is widened and there is a sidewalk, there will still be 20 feet left?
Mr. Mino?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, approximately. I'd have to confirm that, but there would be a boulevard width left beyond the sidewalk.
Thank you. One of the problems with that townhouse development is that there really isn't much room for planting trees. So that would be my concern here, to have some screening from the road for this building, especially if we allow 6 stories, because that is a huge massing. I don't think it's going to look very good unless we can ensure that there is some significant planting available there in the way of trees and not bushes. I think that's all for now. Thanks.
Councillor Piri Kim Rakas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Living in a condo in town, I can tell you that I'm not really concerned about the parking. I think 1.25 spots for every unit makes sense. With that said, though, there will be times when the residents have to park at the SARC. You know, with my building, you know, there are times when everybody has to get out for not street cleaning, but sweeping of the basements, cleaning the basements, repainting the basements, and everybody has to leave the parking lot for those hours. It's a fact of living within a condo. Most of the time, that's when I'm at work, so it's not really a big problem for me in that regard. But there are some people who do have to, you know, find another location to park for those few hours, and it's a fact of life. So it's something I think everybody should be aware of, but I don't think that there is an inherent concern in having 1.25 spots per unit. You know, in our underground parking, it's just one story, and the story covers pretty much the footprint of the building, and all the parking is contained within that. So to have 2 stories down, that's a good chunk of parking, in my opinion. It's difficult to say that without seeing, you know, the way that the planning would be organized, but I have a little bit more comfort. I see it on a daily basis. And with regards to the parking spots, 75 or 74 and 37 parking spots per actual building seems like an adequate number as well. Again, that's just my situation in my condo, but and with regards to a public planning meeting versus a general committee meeting, I've always understood public planning meetings to be for the public, and we do have some members of the public who are concerned, but I'm not sure that the problems will be resolved at a public planning meeting. So if council as a whole doesn't like the idea of a condo in this location, I think maybe just moving towards a general committee is probably a more efficient route ultimately. But whatever everybody else wants to do, I will happily go along with that.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ramuno, I see that there is a need for a peer review, and it's not often that I see the need for a peer review. Can you just explain, I see what's written here, but can you just elaborate in terms of the need for the peer review here, please?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. It's one of our requirements in this secondary plan area, as it is in most secondary plan areas. So the 2B secondary plan did stipulate that when these type of proposals, site plans come forward, we would then get a third-party urban design architectural firm to provide input into the design as submitted by the applicant. So it's a pretty standard process.
Councillor?
And, you know, I just thought of a question for the proponent. Am I allowed to ask one at this time, or? I know that the question about parking has been spoken of this evening, and would having would this site allow for a third level of parking? With that, I know that the proponent talked about the scale and the cost of underground parking, but if we allowed the worser of two evils and allowed for an additional floor, would that make it more scalable to have additional visitor parking and to kind of lift that ratio up?
Mr. Moon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I mean, it's obviously, it's a possibility. I mean, underground parking spaces are very expensive, so, you know, they've got 2 underground levels, but again, based on the parking rate that they're proposing, it's not, you know, totally out of line with what we've been seeing with this type of development, but it's something that we've heard is perhaps a concern, so we're going to go back and take a closer look at the parking supply, as we will with the traffic and access comments.
And one last thing, when we talk about the access to the building, I can't see any possible solution, but I know you guys have you guys are pretty creative in thinking of solutions that normal people don't think about. Can you immediately think of any potential things that can give us some encouragement? Because I'm guilty also when I have to go east on Wellington and use the Esso station because I have one of those darn Esso cards. I have to do the same U-turns as well. Is there a potential solution here, or is that something that really needs to be researched?
Traffic circles.
I think tomorrow morning you'll see a bunch of no U-turn signs along Wellesley Street. No, again, you know, I'm not an engineer, but it's something that I spoke to the regional planning staff today, and they want to sit down and meet us and the applicant, because they do want to take a closer look at what options there are with respect to access. The region has submitted their preliminary comments, and they've, at this point, really said they want to take a closer look at whether they're able to provide a full move access, which is probably unlikely in that location. Options could be, moving the access further north, perhaps combining it with the, and it's just an option, one of the property of Salvation Army. The other option that would, or a requirement would be additional signage along Leslie Street. And it's a question of whether, as part of the Leslie Street road improvements, and I haven't seen the design, whether they are going to extend the center median or provide a break in it. So there are a number of things that the transportation people can provide advice on.
Councillor Rakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, this question's for you. So to you, I'm just wondering, as our regional rep, will this be going to the Transportation Committee at some point? Maybe you could actually give a perspective from our end on our thoughts as far as the entrance and the exit. Does that happen, or is it just going to be dealt with through staff?
It's typically would be dealt with as staff. Correct me if I'm incorrect. It's a staff process, but I've got some comments that might speak to that.
And I think that'd be great if you could bring that Aurora perspective to it and give them like what our understanding is of what happens at that area on that street. I'll try to keep it short. I think I have pretty much the same concerns that I'm hearing around the table as far as the entrance and the exit. I do have some other concerns, which I'm sure most of you are probably going to know what I'm going to say, is that I do have concerns with the fact of the density and the height changing. We heard from the proponent as far as when it came to the parking and the 1.25 that it was stated that council has applied this to other sites, and so therefore we should allow it, for this one. And so that is always my concern when we look at these applications is that we're looking at making these changes, and while, it might be okay for this one in particular, we have to look at it overall of what we want to do within the whole community. And so if we allow it here, we're going to have other applications that come forward and are going to be asking for those same changes, saying, well, you allowed it over here, and you set that precedent. So, that's always my concern. Can it be built 4 stories and within the density number? I don't know. Can they still make money at that aspect? I don't know. I'd love to see it if it came in at that. And as far as intensification, while it's at Leslie and Wellington area and it's a major corridor area, it's really not the area that we've identified for intensification. So, if it's great to say, let's allow the intensification here, we're adding those numbers, but does that mean that in turn, we can turn around and say no to someone that's looking to put, a development in the area that we actually want the intensification? Can we say that, well, no, we're not going to allow this one because we allowed the numbers to go over here? And I'm pretty sure we can't do that. So I just think that we need to be careful and cautious in how we proceed on certain applications. And so, those are my concerns, and hopefully, we can work with the applicant and try to come to a compromise where we can all be happy.
Thank you, Councillor. A couple of comments. I just spent 3 weeks in Europe, and we are not Europe, and we will, rightly or wrongly, never be like Europe. And yes, my liver is recovering. Thank you very much. But I think we can steal ideas from them. And one of the things that they do in great abundance, we were just in France, but we drove a lot, is traffic circles. And the region has just put one in on Aurora Road at Keel. Keel? Keel. And as we know, we have traffic circles in and around town. And yes, traffic circles are expensive, but traffic circles are incredibly efficient. And traffic circles allow for, well, unless you've been around the Arc de Triomphe, which doesn't count, they allow for calculated U-turns. So it allows you to do that, allows you to get around. And the other thing you notice when you're in Europe, and again, it's a function of the country, is smaller cars. So can we look at, so I'm happy to go to staff at the region and say, can we look at it, does it make sense to look at a traffic circle here? Is that some way that we can, because I agree with you, right in, right out is going to be a challenge. And that's a restriction of the region. That's a restriction of the region transportation group. It's because they don't want full access turns, especially in that close a proximity to a major intersection already. But I would be, I think, pretty confident in saying that a lot of people who would potentially live in that building would probably want to drive to the GO parking lot. Well, do you need a full-size car to drive from Leslie to the GO station? You know, I saw Toyota has a fascinating enclosed three-wheeled motorcycle that would be perfect for one person to get from their place to the GO station, because typically those cars go from one to the other and don't get used for a lot of other things. I think part of what we need to do, and looking at this holistically, are there other ways to manage the situation? Are there other ways that we can look at this to help make it more efficient? Is the proponent willing to look at things like putting in, Zipcar? You know, the car rental type facility. In downtown Toronto, and again, we're not downtown Toronto, but they're building condos with zero parking. And if you listen carefully, when the gentleman got up and talked about parking, he talked about how in Toronto, they sell the underground parking. And they sell for as much as $60,000 for that space. So that definitely will factor into people who move into a building like that as to whether or not they get others. So I think it's incumbent on us to work with the proponents in cases like this, to look at other ways that we can help accomplish some of those and change the way we think. And this comes from a dedicated dyed-in-the-wool car guy. But we simply have to change how we do things, because we can't afford to keep building these parking spots. It doesn't make financial sense. I've said this before, the parking garage at the GO station would cost well in excess of $30 million if we were going to build it today. And it's pretty much a useless use of space, in my opinion anyways. So I think that we have an opportunity to perhaps start to look at some different ways to do things. So again, if you could just take some of those comments into account, Mr. Moon, I would appreciate it. For the second time around, then we have Councillor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're right. But at the moment, we have a car-dependent area, as Councillor Abel said. So either yourself or Mr. Ramuno, could we find out what the plan is for York Region Transit, how they intend to service Leslie and even Wellington, because there are a lot of people moving into that area. I think it's 8,000. So I would love to know what their plan is for the future. There is no comment from fire yet. Are they going to have a problem with one exit entrance?
Mr. Moon.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll look to Lawrence. I don't believe we've received comments from them, but typically they don't have a problem with single entrances into a building of this type, provided they're able to enter the site. And they have other building code requirements for fire prevention with respect to water connections, et cetera. So it's not uncommon.
Thank you. There is the potential that the traffic will go through the Walmart Plaza. And State Farm was very resistant. They did not want to have a public throughway through their land. Do they own, we don't have anything to do with State Farm Way, do we? I may have that name wrong, but you know what I mean, the road that goes from the shopping center through the State Farm property? Could,
Certainly,
they
through you, Mr.
pro-
Mayor, I'm just checking, because I haven't looked at that in a while, but we've got First Commerce Drive and State Farm, and I believe that the majority of those are municipal roads.
so the road through State Farm
they're
is ours, and they couldn't prevent us from using it?
That's right. There is, I mean, getting into State Farm Insurance, there is, they've got their private driveway access, but State Farm and First Commerce are municipal roads.
Thank you.
Any other speakers, please? Okay, it's calling the vote on the motions on the floor. Well, it absolutely is, but someone has to stick their hand up to do that. Councilor Abel?
Sure, I'll make the amendment that we bring it back to another planning meeting to address the concerns.
Seconded by Councilor? No. Future GC meeting. So the amendment to bring it back to a future public planning meeting. Comments or questions on the amendment? Councilor Abel. Councilor Humphries, pardon me. No comments or questions on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? Contrary? That's carried. Back to the main motion as amended, which is to bring this back to a future public planning meeting, excuse me. No, right now it's... No. So it's to bring it back to a future public planning meeting. If there's no more comments or questions, all in favor then? Contrary? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming out. Confirming bylaw, please. Councillor Perry, Councillor Kim, all in favor? Contrary? That's carried. Motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Humphries, Councillor Abel, all in favor? Contrary? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Lawrence.
Jeff, did I hear you correctly? Did you say you're selling your Jag to get a smaller car? Yeah. One of the zip ones?